Yeah. Okay. So thanks, Steve. I think we're starting to be all right. Yeah. So we'll carry on.
Yeah, sorry. So just a little bit on as I was saying about the Flybuys program. So obviously a really interactive customer audience there, and the purpose of the loyalty program is to provide a lot of value to customers so that they do want to interact with the program. So what Flybuys essentially does then is it uses some of the insights that it gets on its customers and some of the transactional information where people are buying and accumulating points for their transactions in the shops. And we really marry that data together to hopefully drive some insights for our partners of the program. And these insights really help them identify their customer audience and tailor their marketing and some of their other in-store layouts and other things to really optimize what they do for their customers. So as you can see, kind of the data, accumulating the data and the use of the data is extremely important to Flybuys. And that's really where when Flybuys demerged, and it's just been through a recent demerger out of Coles into a bit more of an independent organisation, we really had to look at some of the business benefits that were available to us now if we really wanted to acquire and become more relevant to a wider audience of partners. So out of that exercise, we kind of identified 4 key areas of investment. One was in our identity platform, one was in our channels and services, another in our core infrastructure, but really the most important one for us was our data platform. We had a lot of complexity in terms of our current data landscape and the amount of tables and batch jobs and how we handled the data, the amount of growth rate we were getting through our transactions, and how we serve that data back up to our partners. So we really sought to kind of revamp, as a starting point, our data platform and provide more value to customers and partners. So what we looked really then to achieve was a redesign and a simplification of our entire technology stack. We started off with kind of identifying the collection points in which we get data from. So these are kind of 2 key areas. So this is where customers interact with the Flybuys program, and then other areas where customers interact with a partner directly. So between these 2 data sets, essentially we pull them in and we use the customer data set to enrich the transactional data set and serve those insights back up to our partners in a range of different ways and allow them to kind of drill down and get some insights out of that information, enrich some of their own personal data warehouses, identify kind of deeper level insights through surveys and campaigns. So it was really important for us to make sure that we had really strong principles around security, able to process and handle the data at larger volumes than we currently were. The exchange of data was really important as well. So because we accept sensitive data from our partners and obviously want to redistribute it back into partner networks, we had to make sure that it was tracked and secured properly and isolated. So that segmentation ruling and the security was really fundamental to the redesign of the environment. So once we kind of identified this need, we went out to market and had a look at some options. They kind of really fell into different categories. So there's a bunch of third-party tooling, so dedicated tooling that we could put together. There was Snowflake as a bit more of a cohesive platform play, and then we looked at a lot of cloud-native environments, so tools that came straight out of the box out of your Azure or your AWS environments. Where Snowflake performed really well was around the ability to kind of secure and do role-based access. That was kind of a great out-of-the-box function that kind of we could stand up really quickly. Its ability to store and interact at real time with large amounts of data, the actual warehousing capability itself, so its ability to act as a warehouse. And one thing that we were very conscious of, being quite heavily in the retail space, was cloud portability, given the fact that AWS has a retail arm. We wanted to make sure that if for some reason we saw that as a strategic direction we didn't want to go with anymore, that we were able to kind of move between cloud providers. So cloud portability featured quite heavily in terms of our technical decision making. Once we kind of rolled out, and we're still in the middle of the rollout, but where we are at the minute is, if you like, our first product offering to our partners. We had some amazing kind of results. I guess the key metrics that stood out the most was the ability to process all of our nightly transactions. So where this kind of came in at the 4.5, 5 hour mark, the initial testing kind of led to about 60 seconds up to kind of 2 minutes. So that was a huge dramatic increase in our ability to ingest large amounts of data. The storage costs, so once we converted large amounts of storage, we saw a 90% reduction in the cost of storing this data. In terms of the recovery time, so in terms of disaster recovery, with Snowflake being a key component of that, our estimates were about 3 days in terms of end-to-end recovery of our data center, and now it's roughly about 16 minutes. The security and the tracking, as I was kind of mentioning before, we were able to kind of dramatically increase the capability that we had there, and we managed to get proper RBAC controls and row-level filtering based on role types, which was enforced through the Snowflake environment. And particularly the auditing, which was going to be another really key component to making sure that we handle our partner data appropriately, giving them the ability to audit any data that they allow us to be custodians of was very important. So as you can see from the slide, there's just some rough designs of how our ingestion pipeline worked and some of the other key components that worked really well with the Snowflake technology stack. We were able to get some more immediate kind of business value out of spending less time, if you like, manually grooming data and creating insights for partners, kind of allowing them to stand up self-service dashboards and for them to actually gain these insights independent of us and self-serve. So that saved us, was obviously a great benefit for the partners, but also some operational efficiencies in there. So that was kind of, if you like, the main success story around our decision to go with Snowflake, and yeah, looking forward to increasing our footprint there and using it for much broader use cases as well.
Okay, thanks, Brad. That's wonderful and great insight into how Flybuys is using Snowflake. Just a couple of quick questions. One of them perhaps would be around data visualization. How are you using visualization, and what techniques are you using in there?
So data visualization, like I was saying, there was kind of almost immediate business benefit in allowing partners to kind of access and visualize the data in real time. That was something that we went for more immediately, and we did a bit of a tool selection there. At the moment, we're using a tool called Sisense, which basically interacts directly with Snowflake, allowing a much kind of richer UI experience. We'll be going through and making sure that we have the appropriate visualization tools for internal reporting as well. So that's where, if you like, our next stage rollout will start to come into effect.
All right, that's terrific. So the next question I have is around data efficiency. You talked about, the processing time going from 5 hours down to 60 seconds, right? Could you talk us through some of the impact those kind of efficiency has had or will have on Flybuys as a business?
So I guess back to the original statement around, one of the things we identified was our ability to expand the business and take on new partnerships. Given the fact that ingesting data took 4 to 5 hours, if we were to double our partnerships, that essentially means that our processing time goes to an unmanageable state if we're getting the same amount of transactions. So it was a business constraint and something that was always going to hamper Flybuys if we didn't come up with a better way of doing things. the combination, I guess, of the way Snowflake can separate storage and compute was a really great mechanism for us to fast forward the, if you like, the ingestion of large data sets and really simplify a lot of the ways that we were doing, as you saw on one of the previous slides, like on the 600 batch processes running in the background to get that data in. We were able to go and cull a lot of that double handling out and simplify the whole process.
Terrific. That's wonderful. So I have another question here about, again, data security being so huge for you. The question is, can you talk a bit more about data security and how you ensure data is secure when it's passed to a partner?
Yeah, so we've basically established some pretty strict data handling processes. So encryption at rest, encryption in transit, all kind of PGP encrypted before we get it. So in the you can see in the ingestion pipeline, data kind of landing in, and I know it's quite small, so apologies for that, but basically landing in an S3 bucket and Talon picking it up. The first thing Talon does is, if you like, is kind of de-encrypt that to analyze some of the data packets, and then what it does is it kind of tags it with metadata to understand what type of data it is, and based on the classification, it'll actually put it into different Snowflake repositories with different levels of access. So everything is role-based. So essentially, whenever the data comes in, only partners have access to that data, or Flybuys personnel that actually have a reason for doing that, and that's typically somebody who works on that particular partner account. So it's quite stringent and something that we won't compromise on from a design point of view.
Okay. We have a lot more questions coming in. One of them is, and this is an interesting one. I think it is something that everybody thinks about. Is what were your process to migrate on-premise cloud data warehouse to Snowflake as a common one?
So for us, I guess it was kind of we definitely knew we had to get into, so we had a on-premise Oracle repository or warehouse that was what we were kind of working off. We definitely knew that we needed to move into something that was more flexible, more scalable. We also had, if you like, we had a fundamental architecture or re-architecture that needed to be done in order to allow us to get some of the results and some of the scale that you've seen in today's figures. In terms of handling the migration, we kind of split it up into smaller, easier chunks. So we started off with just the analytics and not the operational parts of our data. And then when we looked at just the analytics part, we then separated it by partners. That was the easiest way for us to pick a manageable data set up and put it into the environment, making sure that we captured the learnings and the best practices as we kind of get in there, as we got the data in there. So there was obviously a learning curve for us to go through, and that was how we kind of handled, if you like, the migration, but also balancing out the risk of migrating, as well as making sure that our systems worked while we were undergoing this migration process.
All right, thanks, Brad. So another key question, which is around data warehousing and methodologies. The question that's come in is, what data warehousing methodology was used, or are you guys using, and was it just a data lake?
It's an interesting question, and what we did is we focused on, if you like, the ingestion of semi-structured data first. So a lot of the raw data that we get is semi-structured, kind of flat file transactional data. We wanted to make sure that when we ingested this data, that it lived in a secure zone in Snowflake as a primary landing zone. So there is, if you like, a landing zone within Snowflake, but it's not our data lake. And so we wanted to, as it comes in and gets tagged, it gets put into a much more relational and analytical format. So we're still expanding out that data model, and so we started off with some basic use cases, but as we start to get more complex in terms of our analytical needs, basically the way it'll work is the data will land in a semi-structured state into Snowflake, and then it'll get put into a data model and essentially to a data catalog. And then it'll be populated into a more relational data warehouse format so that it can be easily analyzed. Right.
Some further question on security. That seems to be the favorite topic today. I've actually got 3 questions which I'm just going to bundle up together. So hopefully that will make it easier for you to respond to. One of the questions that's coming around GDPR and whether you had GDPR requirements and how did you perhaps use Snowflake to meet those requirements for your clients. Another one is around user access and security, and did you end up creating a lot of custom roles to meet those requirements? And again, perhaps customer data privacy. How are you ensuring that the data remains private as it goes from Flybuys to partner and back again? Yeah.
All right. Let me have a go at answering all these. So in terms of GDPR, GDPR isn't an enforced requirement here in Australia. So what we do, though, is we're predicting that there'll be some movement on that in the market. So we want to make sure that we take the key requirements and put them in as early adopters of what we think will become a bit more stringent in terms of data handling. So we've adopted some of those really around, if you like, the identifying of data, and we're kind of separating out all our PI data and making sure that it doesn't actually, any use cases for that are kind of, if you like, are governed more strictly than any other use cases. So at any point in time, there's a level of analytics that you can do, but as soon as you get to one-to-one matching, it has to go through a different process for analyzing. In the role-based authentication, we did create a few different roles, but really it was pretty straightforward for us, given our use case, to say that either this data is available to you because you have a relationship with the partner or you are the partner. So that was our first level, and then we didn't really give any the operational access. So anything deeper is only on an as-needs basis. So nobody really had operational access to the databases. Only people who were doing analytics on behalf of the partners or the partners themselves. And then the last question, was about handling customer data privacy. So the customer data itself, if you like, lives in a Flybuys instance of our data warehouse, and then we have if you like, an agreement process whereby it gets disseminated into different data sets for different use cases. So that's kind of, again, it's an agreement. We make sure that the customers, that we're not violating any customers' T's and C's, and really what we want to do there is only create use cases that are beneficial for the customer. So that's a bit of, if you like, an ethical checkpoint that we make sure that we're adhering to when we use this data and use it responsibly.
Okay, that's terrific, Brad. So another question on data, I think data sovereignty, perhaps. Is this, or your use of Snowflake, is this hosted in AU or US? And what volumes of data are you ingesting?
So definitely in Australian region. So that was definitely a prerequisite for us, just to make sure that we're compliant to privacy, the Privacy Act in Australia, because we do handle quite sensitive data. And the last part of that question was around the volumes of data. So the volumes of data is basically we sit at around a kind of, if you like, 30 terabytes for analytical data. In terms of ingestion, it's roughly about 6 to 7 million records. I'm not sure what the volume exactly is, but that's the kind of transactional load, if you like.
Okay. Another one around data quality, right? How do you manage the data quality with so much data flowing to and from partner accounts?
So when the data actually comes in and it lands, it goes through some data quality checks. So basically we use Talon for a lot of that checking. So as I was kind of indicating, it lands in a 3-bucket. Talon picks it up, and then we run a series of, validations on that, address validations, formats, things like that. After it passes that, essentially row by row, as the rows get quality checks, the ones that are compliant pass through to the warehouse, the ones that aren't get parked, and then we do a kind of a reconciliation on those rows. And then this is a kind of an ongoing quality process that we bake into our ingestion pipeline. So the more types of data that we get, we just expand out those use cases. But everything's kind of tagged and tracked as it kind of comes through that initial ingestion pipeline.
Thanks, Brad. Okay, so the next one is again that question around data warehousing and data lake, comparisons. And I know you said your landing data is all of it semi-structured and structured into Snowflake, and it is acting to me, it acting as a bit of a both, right? So the question here is, would you say Snowflake is your primary data lake as opposed to having an own data lake and augmenting it with Snowflake's capability in consumption layer? What are your thoughts on that?
So we definitely considered, and we're still considering, to be fair, like the data lake capability in Snowflake, because it is capable of doing some of these things. We don't have it there at the moment, and the reason why is because of the use cases. So as I was kind of indicating, the first use case that we're using for Snowflake is this partner analytics, if you like, warehousing capability. So it's really a secure repository for partners to do analytical analysis of. While we are ingesting semi-structured data in there, it's really only to keep those segregation rules in place and to then go on and put it into a structured format. We will look at it later to see whether we want to put the data lake in there, but we're not doing any real-time handling of that data off Snowflake directly. So we're not triggering anything. We're not doing any real-time analytics. That's actually separate at the minute. But it's definitely something I think that's worth exploring further as we kind of expand our knowledge of Snowflake.
Okay. So the next one, I think this is a bit about the diagram that you've put up there on the slide. The question's coming around, can you please explain interaction between Talon and Slack? So perhaps you want to give a bit more detail on that.
So as I was kind of saying before, as Talon picks up the files and does the quality assurance checks on it, any anomalies it finds, it actually posts it to Slack on a Slack channel. So that lets essentially our data team subscribe to that and actually see what's popping up. Are we getting the right amount of volumes through the ingestion pipeline? Are there some things popping out of there that shouldn't be there? And it kind of gives us immediate feedback to identify problems in the batch processing of that we're doing at the minute. So it's really a subscription channel for us to, if you like, get a bit of a news feed of the success rate and the quality of some of that data coming in.
Okay, thanks, Brad. So the next question is around duplication of data. So how do you enforce that no duplicate records get uploaded into Snowflake?
That would definitely be part of our quality checks. So the an immediate check for us is basically the record count. So if there was a large amount of duplications, we would pick them up straight away, given the fact that there'd be a bit of the file would be a lot larger than an average file, and that would be typically where a duplicate error would come in. On a one-to-one basis, we do some quality checks on that to make sure that we're, key identifiers or key indexes basically aren't duplicated across the file. So that's a bit of how we keep it at that point in time. There is other checks that we do in the Snowflake environment itself as we're kind of moving it from that unstructured or that semi-structured state, into that more relational model in the structured state. We do, again, look for any anomalies or duplicates in that data set, and that's part of the data governance that we'd be looking at.
Okay, that's terrific. There's been a couple of follow-up questions on the data visualization question I asked you earlier on. some people wanted to know a bit more. There is a question that's come in, and I'll read it out to you exactly as it says. What tool did you use as front end for reporting, whether Tableau, Power BI, or the other ones that you mentioned? Is your data sourced directly from Snowflake or analytical servers such as maybe SSAS? Right. So do you have another layer between Snowflake and the actual end user reporting, or are you running those directly on top of Snowflake?
So at the moment, just for the partner analytics, we're using a product called Sisense. Basically because the type of analytics that we want to present to our partners is really self-service, really, if you like, high-level visualization. And Sisense was quite an easy way to get that up and running. The data does move from Snowflake into the Sisense environment for optimization. So there is if you like, a data transfer from Snowflake into Sisense, and then it essentially cubes the data so that it can be kind of analyzed quickly. For internal reporting, we're still very much looking at kind of Tableau, Power BI as potentially better fits for internal BI use cases. We're still going through that process at the minute, and so we'll definitely get to, I think, over the next coming weeks, what we think is the right model for that. We didn't use Sisense automatically as an internal fit because we felt like the types of BI that the internal teams wanted to run was a lot more complex, and they had, if you like, a bit more free-range querying that they wanted to do that the Sisense tooling didn't really fit. It wasn't a great fit for. But again, the Sisense tool really had some powerful, if you like, user experience and kind of representations of the data that made it really good fit for the partners.
All right, so we're nearing the end of the webinar. Just one final question I'll throw at you, and then we'll take the rest offline, and we'll come back to that. The final question is really around partnership and what has really worked for partners, and if there are any challenges, what kind of challenges have you faced so far? And another question that kind of ties into this is what's your partner feedback has been?
So I think the key thing was, Flybuys, as I said, has been a long-lived company. It's been around 15, 20 years. And it has a really great view of customers. The partners really, it's really hard to get that view of customer independently, given the fact that the interaction rates and the breadth of the customer database of Flybuys is so broad. What we're trying to do for partners, and where we've had a lot of positive feedback, is give them something to get some insights around customers that interact with that retailer and why they interact with it. And really, it really helps them kind of, if you like, shape their own strategies around what they can learn from the combination of data sets. Enabling them to get that information in a self-service way at a kind of, at a more executive level has been quite positive. And so giving them that capability, it allows them to get a lot more value out of the Flybuys program and see what's happening in terms of when they do put some marketing out there in a much more friendly way. So that's been really positive. In terms of, challenges, getting one of the things that we want to get to is real-time interaction data. So what we would love to do is kind of stand this up with partners so that as sales are increasing or as the customers are interacting with the program or an offer more, we'd love to get that in a real-time way and put that straight into some of these dashboarding tools straight away for the customers to have or the partners to have a look at. That's been a bit of a challenge because obviously getting that data from a source system all the way over to our environment, there's a lot of legwork and a lot of legacy systems that we have to work around to get that. So that's been a bit of a challenge, but that's definitely the next goal for us is to get this into partners' hands kind of, more immediately and provide even more value there. All right.
Thanks very much, Brad. I will ask you one final question. We did lose time with some audio issues. So, and I think it's an important question. Because every customer out there, when they're looking at cloud data warehousing solutions, they want to know, did you compare some out there in the market? So the exact question just comes, please let us know the comparative analytics of Snowflake versus other solutions like SQL ADW or Google BigQuery or others. And what was some of your selection criteria when you went about looking at cloud data warehouse solutions?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and we did take our time with this one. And Snowflake separating out, and the way the Snowflake works is there are a lot of new emerging technologies in the data warehousing tech stack, and then the offerings that are really kind of blazing away. Snowflake, separating out the storage and compute function gives it a great advantage to some of the older kind of Redshift and traditional data warehousing tools on the market today. And the most comparable, I think, is definitely BigQuery in the Google tech stack. And we did look at that. I think for Flybuys, though, going with BigQuery, we would have looked to go all in on the Google cloud platform if we were going to do that. And when we looked at the skills in market, we just didn't find as many as some of the the more native AWS environments. So going with BigQuery just for the data warehouse kind of didn't make sense. And so the other comparison was the portability between cloud and cloud providers, which we were really looking for. So BigQuery and a lot of the others are kind of locked in to a particular cloud provider. We wanted to be a little bit more agnostic, and Snowflake helps us, if you like, move our warehouse across different cloud platforms. So it kind of was comparable and performant as to a lot of the really leading cloud native data warehousing technologies that you'll see today, but it gives you a little bit more agnostic, and it's got a really good skills base domestically. So there's a lot of people coming up that have really good Snowflake skills. So that the combo of those things really made the decision a lot easier.
Thanks, Brad. And again, I want to thank you for your valuable contribution and taking the questions today. And I'm sure everybody in the audience have found it tremendously useful as well. There are some pending questions which we will circle back on and respond back to. However, we have run out of time, unfortunately, so I just would like to thank everyone and close out the webinar at this stage. Thank you. Bye-bye.